John King, USA, CNN, weeknights 7 Eastern.
For some perspective on this historic and fascinating day and a glimpse around the corner, let's check in with CNN's Fareed Zakaria. Fareed, the question is, as we celebrate history, what next? And I want you to listen to a piece of a conversation. I had a fascinating conversation with Michael Hayden, the former CIA director and a retired general, of course. He was talking about the times he had been in the room with Hosni Mubarak, talking about the importance of democracy and human rights.
He didn't understand what we're telling him. I think that's the way Mubarak looked at us when we were talking to him about these things. That we were actually slipping into this, kind of admirable but fundamentally simplistic American view of things, and that we know better, and that's kind of the attitude that he had.
If that's the kind of attitude Hosni Mubarak had, my question on this day is, what about the new military rulers of Egypt who are most likely in the room when those conversations take place? Do we have any reason to believe they are different, that they will actually embrace democracy?
No. Fundamentally, John, it's a very good question, and the answer is no. In fact, you could make the case that the military are actually even less inclined to do that. The Egyptian military owns hundreds of economic entities, factories, trading companies, and things like that. And they have now, to begin with, got rid of all the businessmen whom they didn't like by and large. And now I'm sure what they're trying to figure out is how much reform do they have to do, and how much can they preserve their power.
And that's a very different calculation of being the guardians of this transition to full and open multi-party democracy.
Well, I think they must recognize that the writing on the wall is inevitable. They have to allow elections. They have to allow either serious amendments to the Constitution or a new Constitution itself. But the interesting question is, how much will they try to put in protections for their power and privileges?
And as we look at some of the history you just talked about, let's look at Iran for a moment. This is an important day in Iranian history, and I'm wondering if you see a potential domino effect, knowing that the Iranian opposition movement plans a demonstration on Monday. We also know some of those opposition leaders have been arrested, that the internet has been choked off in Iran. But listen to the Obama administration trying to send a message to Iran here.
Let your people speak. Release your people from jail. Let them have a voice.
I think if the government of Iran was as confident as they would have you believe in the statements that they put out, they would have nothing to fear with the peaceful demonstration like those that you've seen in Cairo and throughout Egypt. They're not that confident. They're scared.
Will Egypt impact Iran?
There's no question Egypt is going to have a huge impact. Egypt is the heart and soul of the Arab world. Iran is not an Arab country, but it is on the outskirts of the Arab world. Egypt has always been a great exporter of culture, and so trends that begin in Egypt always spread. Now, it's worth pointing out, Iran's system is a little more complicated. It is not a simple, brutal dictatorship. The ruling regime does have some support. Every survey we've ever seen, every anecdotal piece of evidence. And there are many ways of manipulating things, patronage, power. But I do think that this will have an impact. It will energize the opposition, and the Iranian regime must be wondering, what do they do in response to this? And I think they must see the writing on the wall, which is that it can't be a clampdown. It'll have to be something more sophisticated than that.
And we've all heard Wael Ghonim, the Google executive in Egypt, say this is the internet revolution, that he's going to write a book, Revolution 2.0. What about further around the world? In China, we know that China blocked access on the internet to some searches during the crisis and the uprising in Egypt. Today, the foreign ministry there put out a statement saying it was talking about the developments in Egypt, and it stressed social stability and normal order. What about China?
That's the trillion-dollar question. I think that in the Chinese case, there are some features that may make it different. The first is there has been enormous economic progress in China. So the average Chinese has seen his income quadruple in the last 20 years. China has been able to move fast on the economy. It has also opened up in a kind of social way that people often don't realize. You can work wherever you want in China. You can move where you want. There's a lot of social freedom that didn't exist. But the political freedoms have lagged far behind. And I know there are people in China, in the Communist Party, who believe that this gap between the economic level of development and the political level of development has to be bridged, and it has to be bridged by greater political freedom. So far, these people have lost the argument.
Fareed Zakaria, thanks for your help.
Pleasure as always, John.